Hey everybody, ABC 10 meteorologist Brenden Mincheff here with a drought update. We're going to take a quick look at the drought monitor, then we're going to move on. We're going to talk about warming nights and also one of the most important places in the entire state of California. That would be the Delta. Yeah, we're going to get to all that. Let's start with a check of the map though, and we're going to see no drought for 71.88% of the state. That is all that gray there. Abnormally dry, 23.49%. That number has actually gone up just a fraction of a percentage point, but again, not technically in drought. So really the map remains, for all intents and purposes, unchanged. Let's talk some snowpack, though. This number continues to get smaller. That April 1st average, about 12% of that April 1st average in the northern Sierra and 14% in both the central and southern Sierra as the melt continues at this point of the year. That was updated on June 30th. And so statewide, 325% of average and 13% of that April 1st average. So that's the snowpack. Reservoirs, though, are doing very well as well. Maybe you've been to a reservoir recently, Lake Shasta, Lake Oroville, maybe Lake Folsom. It's been so hot recently. Putting some feet in the water, getting in the water is probably the best way to cool off. So as of July 1st, these numbers all above or at or above 94%. Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom, three of the key players here in Northern California. Speaking of the heat, well, it had been a while since we had a high temperature of 100 degrees or greater. In fact, between September 10th and June 29th, that was 293 straight days with a high temperature of less than 100 degrees. That was tied for the sixth longest such stretch since the year 1990. But again, that has since come to an end. Let's look back at the month of June at this point, which is done and dusted, but there's a couple of things that are really going to stand out here. The first thing might be all the days in blue, right, with below average temperatures. We had a lot of days with highs in the 80s, even plenty of days with highs in the upper 70s in the month of June. Our average high for most of the month was climbing through the 80s towards about 93 degrees by the time we got to the end of the month. So yeah, plenty of days with below average temperatures, 23 of them in fact. Only 7 days with above average highs, but the days that were above average were actually quite a bit above average, pretty warm. 93, 96 for the first weekend in June in downtown Sacramento. And then the last couple of days in June, just to change things up on us, 99 degrees and then 105 degrees, which at the time was the warmest day we had so far this year. Now, I showed this chart a little while ago because the month of June in 2023 was on the chart for one of the top 5 coolest months that we had. But with those last couple of days, which clocked in way above average, that has since fallen out of the top 5 coolest that we've had. But still, it was much better than the June we had last year in 2022, when that average high temperature for the entire month was 93.2 degrees. All right, so the month of July just started today. The recording of this video is happening on the morning of July 2nd. So we only have one day to talk about, but man, it was a hot day. Downtown Sacramento made it to 109 degrees. The average high is 93. So way, way above that to start the month of July in Sacramento. And we've got another day in the triple digits pending for July 2nd. So the warmest days of 2023. 109 degrees, no surprise, was easily the warmest day we had so far. And in fact, it tied the old daily high temperature record for July 1st in downtown Sacramento at 109, previously set in 1950. Sacramento Executive Airport, 107 was not a high temperature record, but doesn't even matter. 107, 109 feels exactly the same. 109 degrees in Stockton was a new record there, also beating the previous year. And then 106 degrees was the high temperature down in Modesto. Not a high temperature record. But again, the difference between 106 and 109, it all feels just about the same. All of us were baking across the valley yesterday. I want to talk about the Climate Shift Index now. This is an interesting tool that we can use. This is developed by the team at Climate Central. An interesting tool that we can use because it can tell us how much more likely a high temperature or low temperature was made by the effects of climate change. And so this is for July 2nd, which again, we're in for more triple digits today. About 107 is the forecast high in Sacramento for July 2nd. So how much more likely is that high temperature made by climate change? Well, 2 on the scale of 0 to 5, and then negatives if it's made less likely. So the high temperature today is twice as likely to happen because of a changing climate. Now, here's something that's really interesting. The low temperatures, which have been in the upper 60s, low 70s across the valley, in and around Sacramento, that climate shift index is a 4. And so what that means on the index scale, our high temperature was made at least twice as likely due to climate change. That's a dominant climate change influence. But when we talk about that level 4 on the climate shift index, that's extreme climate change influence. Our low temperatures, right, the coolest part of the day, which is just before sunrise, climate change is making these warmer temperatures at least 4 times more likely to happen. So we can say there is an extreme climate change influence on the low temperatures that we are having this weekend in downtown Sacramento. But it's actually part of a trend over the last 50 years of warming summer nights. And so this is for the United States as a whole since the year 1970 to the year 2022. And we can see that the average low temperature in the summer months has increased by 2.6 degrees on average across the United States. Here in Northern California, here's a map of Sacramento, follows that trend almost exactly and has increased by about 2.5 degrees since the year 1970. You can see that here, that trend line very obviously increasing over the last 50 years, and certainly since about the year 2000 or so, you see that number has certainly increased over the summer. Again, this is just for the summer months, not for the year as a whole. We can look at the year as a whole, but specifically this is talking, again, just about the summer months. And so that's part of that climate shift index, right? We can pinpoint the day, today's low and high temperatures based on climate change, based on that climate shift index, but we can also see the trend over the last 50 years follows that as well, which tells you something is changing, right? The other thing is that the summer days, the average departure, how much warmer we are over the summer, over the last 50 years, again, same kind of map, 1970 to 2022. This is in Sacramento, Northern California, increased by about 1.7 degrees as a whole. Now, that accounts for temperature throughout the daytime, the low and the high, but it's obvious to see that our overnight low temperatures are increasing at a faster rate than our daytime high temperatures. And that's one of the things when we talk about heat risk, right? When we talk about that excessive heat warning in the foothills especially, is why they had that excessive heat warning first, why they had that higher heat risk first, is because of how much warmer they are overnight. Those warm overnights don't allow people and animals really the opportunity to cool off and let the body come back down from the heat of the daytime. And in fact, I bring this up a lot when we talk about warming overnight low temperatures. In 2020, in British Columbia, Canada, overnight heat and how hot it was, well, really all day long during the afternoon and during the overnights, killed more people than COVID. And that was, again, in the summer of 2020, over about a week span in British Columbia. Now, this is something I talked about last week with the changing averages, changing extremes. I like to show this chart. This is a bell curve because it roughly looks like a bell. And so events on the tails at each end, we call those the tails. Those are the extremes, extreme heat, extreme cold. This is for the past climate. Most of our days would fall somewhere right in here in that middle. And that's why it's highest there. That's showing you where most of the data, most of the days come from. Here's what's happening with climate change. Our bell curve is shifting. And so as it shifts, our normal temperatures shift. So now we're seeing the majority of our whatever we're talking about, average highs, average lows, overnight temperatures, rainfall, snowfall, a lot of that is now shifting. So now we're seeing that extreme becoming more common, but also the tails, right? That extreme is becoming more common as well. So you can think about this in context of overnight lows, right? 50 years ago, most of our overnight lows fell right here. With that changing climate, with climate change, now we're seeing most of our overnight lows falling over here, which are warmer. And so this is how we can connect the dots with climate change. And with our daytime highs, we always focus on the triple digits. It's always kind of the most astounding number to look at is when we climb into those triple digits. But those overnight lows are perhaps even more important because that is kind of our rest and reset that we get from Mother Nature. And if those temperatures continue to climb at a rate they're climbing, that rest and reset that we get during the overnights is really not going to be there. Now, the other part of the story to talk about is the delta, and I kind of tie these in together because the delta, when I talked to the newly appointed water master, Jay Ziegler, he told me that the delta is perhaps the place in California most impacted by climate change because it's fighting a war on two fronts with fresh water and salt water and how that impacts water quality. This is all part of an upcoming special that we're doing here at ABC 10 called Water Wasted. But I want to go ahead and focus on the Delta here. Let's talk about the Delta. Here's what Jay had to say, and I really left these sound bites long because I wanted him to be able to kind of tell that whole story. Take a look.
The position of the Delta Watermaster was created by the Delta Reform Act in 2009, and essentially the Delta Watermaster is something of a referee of water rights with the goal of protecting water quality in the Delta.
Jay Ziegler was appointed as the Delta Watermaster at the beginning of April, and while he might be new to the position, he's not new to the Delta.
This region, the Delta itself, it's a 5-county area, some 700,000 acres, and 57 reclaimed islands, and some up to 200 islands at last count throughout the Delta, is really uniquely threatened by climate change. In fact, I think I would make the argument that this area is more threatened by climate change than any other place in the United States, because it's dealing with sea level rise coming from the west and more unpredictable freshwater conditions as a result of changing precipitation from climate change. So again, the big winter rains that we saw this past winter and 20 years of drought interrupted by a couple of rainy years is the new normal that California is more likely to see. And you've got a wide array of different land use and economic interests at stake here. You have about 75% of the land in the Delta is used for agriculture. Every crop from tomatoes to grapes, triticale and potatoes and corn, rice, and everything in between. And so you've got a wide diversity of crops that are grown in the Delta. And at the same time, it's a really unique ecosystem. In geologic time, it's very young. It's what you see around you is really 10,000 years old, and it's the product of the end of the last glaciation in California, where this area was really created by a lot of deposition from the glaciers melting. And then we've all been through the Carquinez Straits. It has a very narrowing effect and really held sediment behind it. And so that created a very unique system called an inverse delta, because in the Mississippi Delta, that's a traditional delta where the rivers work to just push soil out and create more land. This delta was created by holding soil back and holding water back at the same time and creating a massive wetland complex. So we've lost 95% of that, and that's why I also say it's kind of California's first big public works project dating from the end of the gold rush era. Many of these islands have been here since 1860. So you have a wide array of land use types, and you've got different economics interests in that, from recreational users in the Western Delta that are out here for kayaking, windsurfing, kite surfing, a lot of bass fishermen in the Delta. You've got agriculture in the Delta. You've got agritourism in the Delta. You've got a lot of people that find this an amazing place to live, and it's a refuge from a lot of people from the Bay Area moving west into Delta communities. And so it's a very unique place with a lot of competing values. And I think the one thing that every one of those stakeholders would agree on is what we really have to watch for the health of the Delta in the future is watching what's our water quality like, what is the salinity of the water like, and how do we keep a freshwater and brackish freshwater ecosystem together functioning.
So the Delta is hugely important, from wildlife and recreation uses to agriculture and water deliveries. It's really the keystone of the State Water Project.
Let's call it the water hub of California, and all the nature that depends on that, and the 75% of Californians that live to the south of us, and recognize this is a very complex place. I mean, we have 700 miles of waterways across the 5-county area of that we call the Delta, and so that's a trip down to Los Angeles and back, basically, in this one area across 5 counties in this region. And so to put it in scale, if we fail to do this here, everyone in California deserves to ask, Well, where are we going to succeed in achieving sustainable water management for this state?
The Delta has pretty much always been surrounded by controversy due to its status as California's water hub. But perhaps no issue has been more divisive than the Delta Tunnel project.
That proposal has not been presented to the state board. The Delta Water Master and the State Water Resources Control Board have an independent role and really need to weigh those other factors that are in California law in protecting water quality standards for all beneficial uses of water. The Delta can't be seen as an endless supply source, just as the Colorado can't be seen as an endless supply source. So the state board, when presented with a proposal, if they are presented with a proposal for a tunnel or other conveyance, would evaluate a project based on all of those concerns about the multiple uses of water throughout the Delta, through the lens, really, as we've been talking about, through the lens of water quality. And that's fundamentally the issue that I think unifies both Delta interests and frankly has to bring the state into the conversation in a broader sense to really protect these values that are fragile in the Delta and that are increasingly fragile at a time of climate change when we're going to experience longer droughts and flashier, bigger storm winters, just like this past one.
I also asked Jay about something we hear a lot about: wasting water.
I think you're going to find that wasting water is a loaded term that may affect the beholder's interest.
And that was Jay Ziegler, the Delta Water Master for the state of California. Now, again, that you're going to hear more from Jay in an upcoming special, Water Wasted, here on ABC 10. Here's a quick preview of that, which you can look forward to happening later this month.
If it's not working, show me the proof. I often, when people go, they're tearing their hair now, oh, it's terrible, we manage water horribly, and no, we don't.
Now we are in a place where we are just supremely bound to knowing every water drop.
We're often so focused on our engineered infrastructure above the surface that we forget to utilize effectively the natural infrastructure.
What we need to be able to do is capture water when it's available, move it and store it so that we can have water supply throughout. And this year, if we had been able to have the Delta Conveyance Project online in January, we would have captured another 228,000 acre-feet of water, and that's enough to feed about 2.3 million people, or about 800,000 households.